Greetings. In this video, I'm going to show you how to draw this. Basically, it's a drawing based on a gasket, and I just use it to help students kind of get used to using some of the commands and things in AutoCAD. And I'm going to kind of walk you through this. It's really best to kind of watch me go through it first, and then watch it a second time while you do this along with the video. And of course, I'm going to be cutting out many of the pauses and things like that, so you won't have that in there. It'll be a kind of a short video compared to what it could be. So you'll need to watch it and hit the pause button quite often as you draw. And that goes for any time that you're watching any of my videos and following along. But with AutoCAD, let's see, we're going to create this shape. Of course, the reason we learn AutoCAD is because it's kind of the industry foundation used in, architecture and engineering and everything you can imagine. I've even heard of like clothes designers and people like that using AutoCAD. But it is kind of an industry foundation drawing and designing tool. Now, when you go to trade school or college after high school, you're certainly going to be using AutoCAD. You're going to be using AutoCAD, and more than likely you'll also be using a program called Revit, which is made by the same company. Company name is Autodesk. But to get you started with AutoCAD and get you used to all of the geometry and the tools and things like that, there's first off, I'll tell you there's more than one way to do almost everything. And two, I'll also tell you that some things you're going to see me stumble around. That's because they periodically send out updates for the software, and they might change a feature or two. And it might be a feature that I used. There's a couple that I discovered this morning when I was doing this with the second period class that they don't exactly behave the way I'm used to from just a couple of months ago. So anyway, we're going to get on with drawing this shape. Now, when it comes to drawing this shape, even though I'm walking you through this one, you're going to get some assignments in the future where it's basically just going to be verbal. It's going to be written down verbal, and you'll have to follow the instructions exactly the way they're written in order to create the shape that you're assigned to create. And that is also a common practice in education because you have to really be used to following verbal descriptions of geometry. And also, as we go through here, I'm going to be showing you how to use some of these tools, and that's really the purpose of this exercise, is to show you how to use these tools and also to kind of build your vocabulary. Pay very close attention to what we call things in this video. You should have already watched the user interface video, which kind of went over the different parts, such as your application menu, your quick access toolbar, your ribbons, your tabs, and all that good stuff. So hopefully you've watched that video, which kind of gets you started on the vocabulary. Now, let me switch drawings here. Okay, so I've already got a drawing open. When you open up AutoCAD, you're going to start a new drawing. You're going to see a screen that looks like this, and you're just going to click in here to start drawing. Once you get in there and your drawing is open, the first thing you want to do is save the drawing and put a name on it. All too often, people get into the middle of a design, they open up a drawing and they start designing and they save it, but they never really saved it with a name on it or anything like that. They just kind of saved it and backed out of it as it was because they had to leave maybe in a hurry or something like that. And they end up with a bunch of files where they have no idea what they are by their name. They have to go through searching on the files to see what it was that they drew. So the first thing, a good habit, is the very first thing you do is name your file. And following a particular naming protocol, like you see here on the top of my screen, and what you'll do is you'll hit the save button right here, okay, and it will bring up a dialog box that looks like this one. All right, and what you're going to do is you're going to type in the name. The name of this assignment is Gasket, okay, and then you'll put an underscore after the assignment name. You'll put your first and last name initial, J and F, That's for me, of course. It's not for you. Another underscore. Please forgive the lunch bell there. But anyway, another underscore, and you're going to put your period number, and it'll be, for this class, will be either 2 or 5. So put 5 if you're in 5th period. Another underscore, and today's date without any slashes or anything like that. So today's date, this is the first month, so 01, 03 is for the day, so it's January the 2nd of 2018. So we just put 18 there. So that tells me what the file is, and you'll actually be sending these files to me electronically once your assignments are complete. And it'll have the name on it. It'll tell me what project it is, who did it, what period you're in, and what date you did it on. Okay. So if I click Save, now I have saved that file actually a second time. So from there, we can start drawing, and you should see your file name right here, DWG file. I'm going to close this because I don't need it. Okay. All right. First off, we're going to use a polyline to draw a rectangle. And it's very important, if you're instructed to use a polyline, that you're using an actual polyline and not just a plain line tool, because you'll get, when it comes to analyzing this data, you'll get different results depending on whether you draw the same rectangle with a polyline as you do with a regular line. Pardon me. So we're going to use a polyline to draw this rectangle. And Polyline is located right up here. This is the icon for Polyline. You can click on that to begin drawing a polyline. However, when you're certified, when you get to take your certification test for AutoCAD, they're going to have you using things kind of the old-fashioned way, which is typing the command straight into the window. But the command here is poly. I want a polyline. And if you give it a second there, it'll pop up with some selections. And I want that first one, which is already highlighted, Polyline. So I just click the enter button to get my polyline. One other thing I forgot to do that I didn't show you is, because we're an architecture class, we do our figures, our measurements in imperial form, feet, inches, and fractions of inches. So do this, go to the application menu and drop that down, and go to Drawing Utilities right here. Click on Units. And right here it says length type decimal. We're going to change that to architectural. And everything else is good. Inches, we want it to say inches, not, whatever, feet or meters or anything like that. We want to say inches. And this is basically a sample output of what you're going to see when it puts it out. And then we click OK. So we're good. Now going back to the Polyline tool, Poly, enter. Okay, now you see my measurements are different inside of the dynamic input boxes. The first thing I need to do is establish a corner, the beginning point of my rectangle, and it can be anywhere you want it to be. I'm going to start mine at kind of the bottom left of the shape. So I just left click and release to get my start point going. And then I move the cursor up a little bit. Right now I'm at 2 3/4 inches. I'm not at a full 8 inches or 8 feet, which is where I want to be. So I type 8 and then the single apostrophe, which means feet, and enter. And I now have an 8-foot line. I'll have to zoom out to get everything in proportion with the screen. Okay, it's not moving for me like I want it to. I want the screen to pan, but it's just not working. Here, let me do that. Okay. All right, so starting my polyline back up, I had to get out of it so I could pan. And that's something that's different. There's some sort of glitch in there since the last time I used it. Okay, so now I have my vertical line at 8 feet. My next line that I want to draw is a horizontal at 15 feet. So I just type 15, the single apostrophe, to get feet. Now I can type in the coordinates or the distance and angle for my next point for this next line. However, there's a way to kind of help you do this. If you mouse over, now as you can see, there's a green line popping up on my screen, and those are snap points. Those green lines are generated from a couple of different functions down here on the status bar. So here, restrict cursor to specified angles. So it's restricting my cursor. It'll snap every 45 degrees. So it snaps on 90, snaps on 45, it will snap again over here on 180, and so forth and so on. I've also got snap, oops, I don't want that. Okay, if I hover again over this other symbol, snap cursor to 2D reference points, which means I can snap my cursor to two-dimensional geometry that's already on screen. That's what I'm going to show you. Because that is on, and I've already set the settings and everything in there, I can go over here and turn on a reference point by hovering over the end point of that piece of geometry. So that's where I want to line this line up to, is that end point. All right, now you can see as I go up and down, I don't have to stay even with it as I drag it over. I can still go up and down, and as soon as I cross that plane, it'll light back up and snap to it. Okay, you see there it is snapping to that plane. And as long as I have my new line that I'm drawing at 90 degrees, then I am going to draw a straight line that is the same distant, equidistant to the other line that is just opposite of it. So I click here, and then that's my new endpoint. And then finally, I can just close everything up by bringing it right there. Now I'm still in the line tool, or the polyline tool. I want to hit the escape button to get out of that polyline tool and go back to just my regular selection tool. Now this is a polyline rectangle. As you see, if I hover over it to highlight it, it's all one piece. It's all recognized as one shape. Okay, there's not 4 separate lines here, there's just one shape. If I were to use the line tool, then I would actually end up with 4 separate lines that would behave separately. All right, the next thing I want to do is I want to put a circle on here to make this gasket. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just kind of making the outline of this gasket. So I go to my circle. Here's the circle command on the ribbon. But if you come down here, you can actually type circle into the screen. That's what I want you to practice getting used to. And you get the circle tool. Now, the command bar down at the bottom, or the command line, has additional instructions in it. Once I'm in the circle tool, you can see if you look down here, it says specify center point for circle. Or I can click on any of these. I can click with my mouse, or I can actually just type those numbers and letters in to go to different functions of the circle, like a 3-point circle or a 2-point circle. Right now my circle is just being generated from the center. So I'm going to put the center of my circle right here on this rectangle. I'm going to left click and release, and I'm going to start dragging out to get a size. Now naturally, just from the beginning, it measures with radius. So I'm whatever I type in here, I'm going to make a basically a 6-foot circle. So I'm just going to type 3 feet inside of the dynamic input box and click enter. And it gives me a 6-foot diameter circle because it was measured from radius. And we know that radius, or we know that diameter is 2 times radius. So if you don't want to do that though, if you want to just draw a circle, maybe you have some data and what you have is the diameter. And of course it may be some convoluted figure with lots of decimals and other things in it. And it's probably hard to divide that in half in your head. So you might want to just draw it from diameter and type in the exact data that they have in the information you're given. And that's when you can go down. Now once I'm going to start my circle, drag it out a little bit. And if I go down here to the command line, I have more instructions. So specify radius of the circle, okay, or type D. That's why that D is highlighted in blue, because it wants me to type D if I want to put in the diameter. So if I type D and then the enter button, I get a diameter, and if I want that to be 3 feet, also type 3 feet, enter, And now I have a 3-foot diameter circle versus a 3-foot radius circle. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of that circle because I don't need it. I was just showing you something there, showing you how that works. All right, now this is the start of my gasket, and there's some things in my gasket that I need to take out. Okay, on this gasket, this geometry right here around the center of the circle does not exist. All right, it needs to come out. And what this is basically, and if you ask any artist, that drawing anything is really just a combination of a bunch of primitive shapes. These are primitive shapes. Circles and rectangles and triangles and things like that are primitive shapes. So to make more complicated shapes, we just put those primitives together, such as I've done here. However, we do need to cut out some of the excess geometry that shows up overlapping. So I'm going to type the word trim. And as you see, trim is the first selection. There's two ways to use trim. I'm going to hit enter, so I'm inside of the trim tool. The first way to use trim is it says select object or select all. Okay, I want to select object first. The way it works in this manner is you select the base object that you want to trim to, that you want to use as the boundary of your trim. And let's say I want to remove this part of the rectangle, the part that's in here. So if I want to remove that, I want to make my boundary the circle. So I click on the circle, making that the boundary, and then I hit the enter button. And now it says select object to trim or shift select to extend. I'm going to trim. So I hover over the part of the geometry that I want removed, and I click. And there it goes, it's gone. Now, I also want to remove part of that circle. So I have to hit enter to exit the command, and then enter again to re-enter the command. Anytime you hit the enter button, it will always re-enter the most recent command. So now I want to remove this part of the circle. So I have to choose first the object that I want to be my foundation or my boundary. So I am going to click on the rectangle. And for some reason my rectangle is acting like it's a different object. So I'm just going to select both lines there so it knows what I'm doing. And clicking enter, and now I can hover over this part of the circle, click, and then hit enter to accept and get out of the command. So now I have a more unique shape. Isn't quite like the shape we started with. Now I'm going to back up because there's another way to use trim. It's a lot simpler, and this is the way I always use trim. Trim, enter, and then it says here where select objects. This is where I selected that first object that I wanted to make that boundary object, that base object. Well, if I click enter here instead of selecting the object, and it basically turns every single piece of geometry into a possible cutting plane, into a possible boundary. So when I do that, in most cases, I can just hover here to erase that line, here to get rid of that line, and then here to get rid of that line. So I did all that in one swoop, one command, without having to exit the command, then go back in the command to remove another element of geometry. Now you'll find that sometimes in the future, when you get some really complicated designs going, that you'll use either one. You might use the trim all option and find that it doesn't work in your application. So you might just have to use the trim object mode of the application. But anyway, there's my shape. The next thing I want to do is, because these are two different shapes, now this is a circle, and this was a single rectangle, but since I've done some editing to it, I broke it apart. But I want to rejoin everything. Now I wanted to join the circle and the rectangle from the beginning as well. So to select all of that, I left click on the upper right hand side of that shape, and then I drag this window over all of it, and then I left click down here to release it, and I have selected all of the components of the geometry, and I type the word join in my dynamic input. There's nothing you have to do. There's no special buttons you have to push. Just start typing words and they will appear right there in the dynamic input. And of course, after typing join, I select enter from the keyboard, and now this whole thing, both of them are just one shape, one polyline. Now I have to create a radius right here because the gasket doesn't, make these perfect 90-degree turns here. It actually comes as a fillet, okay? And a fillet is, a lot of people like to call it fillet when they see it, but it's not fillet, it's fillet. This is the fillet icon right up here at the top of my screen. And you see if I hover over that, it says fillet. Okay, I can press on that to get fillet, or I can type F-I-L-L-E-T and get fillet that way. Now I'm just going to select the first one, the general fillet tool. Zoom in a little closer here. Now there's some instructions down here in my command line, because I'm not just going to make just any old corner there, but it says select first object or undo polyline radius trim multiple. What I want here is a radius. So I'm going to type R and then hit the enter button. Specify the fillet radius. So it tells me right there in that input box what I want the radius to be. Okay, and let's see if I'm reading that right. I want to make it, let's see, half of an inch. Do I want half? No, I want it to, let's make it 6-inch radius. So basically I'll type 6 and then the double quotation per inch, hit enter, and then hover and click my first line. Okay, so I'll click the first line, which is this horizontal line. And earlier I was doing this, and when I clicked the circle line first, it didn't quite work right. So click the straight horizontal line and then select the circle line. Okay, now that was just one fillet. Now everything is still set the same, but I do have to push enter to get back into that command and fillet this side right here. So now I have both of those filleted at a 6-inch radius. Next thing I want to do is to create some chamfers. I want to create some chamfers on these corners here. And there's chamfer, there's a lot of steps to using a chamfer. Chamfer can, you can do different types of chamfers, and you'll learn more about that later. But right now we're just going to do a basic chamfer. Okay, so I type C-H-A-M-F, and then of course it pops up right there, so I'll select that chamfer, and it says select first line, or it gives me options of undoing, and I'm reading that down here in the command line again. Undoing, polyline, distance, angle, trim, method, multiple. I want an angle, okay, and I want a 45-degree angle on all these corners. So if I type the letter A and then enter, it says specify chamfer length on the first line. So I want this angle to cut up on the first line at 1 foot. Enter. Specify chamfer angle from the first line, 45 degrees. Okay, select the first line. Boom, there's the first line. This will be the second line. So they're both, basically I only had to type in the information once because both sides, both lines are going to be 1 foot from the 90-degree angle right here. And there we go. And we have a perfect chamfer. If I want to do the next corner, I can click enter to go back into the command, and I think everything will stay the same, and it does, and there we go. However, maybe I want a different chamfer up here. And let's see, to get a different chamfer, AMF, go into chamfer. Okay, distance. Distance, I can type D to get a distance, and it says select the first line, or specify the first chamfer distance, and that's down here in my command line. So my first chamfer distance is going to be 1 foot, and that's going to be on the first line that I pick. Enter. Now it says specify the chamfer distance, okay, and I want that chamfer distance to be, let's see, let's try 1 foot, see what happens. Okay, now select first line. Okay, select the second line, or shift select to apply corner or this angle. Okay, so I'm going to type A for angle, and I want it to be 20 degrees instead of 45. And default it back to 45, 20. Okay, so click on the first line, then the second line. That did not work the way I planned. Okay, so I don't know, you have to kind of play around with this to really get out of it what you need. Sometimes I really don't use it as much as some people do who use it daily, all day long. I use it when I'm teaching it, but that's about it. Let me try that again. Chamfer. Okay, select the first line or do a distance. I want to do, so let's do angle first. Angle. Specify the chamfer length on the first line. So the first line I choose, now it reads 1 foot 8 inches. I'm going to go ahead and keep it like that because I think it's automatically telling me what I need to select in order to get that angle that I want. So click enter and it says chamfer angle 20. It already says 20 because I put that in last time. Enter, select first line, and that should work. There we go. Okay. So there's my 20-degree angle, okay, from that line, 20-degree angle, and then connects here. It connects 1 foot from the corner, 1 foot from the corner at 20 degrees, and it just went ahead and made up this actual intersection there on its own. Okay, so that is the shape. Next, see how many minutes are we? Okay, I'm going to have to break this down into pieces, but I'm going to continue on because I'm going to roll here. So next, what we want to do is offset. We're going to learn how to use the offset tool. So the offset tool looks like this. This is the icon for the offset tool, and that'll offset your geometry. To use the offset tool, you can just type OFF, and it tells you offset right there. So I click on offset. The first piece of instruction, it says specify offset distance, or it says the word through. You always want to set your offset distance. I'm going to set my offset distance at 1 foot. Okay. So enter. Now select the object to offset. I want to offset this object, this one poly object. I click on it, and then of course I can move it to either side of the line to tell it which side I want it to offset on. Okay, so here I'm going to offset it onto the inside. Now it's starting to look a little bit more like a gasket. Okay, so there is offset. That's how you do that. Anytime you're in a command, such as we were just in offset, you need to get out of it. After I place that offset, and what I can do on offset is I can go around just clicking lines and it'll offset every single line 1 foot. But I don't want to do that, so I use the escape button to get out of the command so that doesn't happen. Now what I want to do is show you how to use the mirror command. Here's the mirror icon right up here. If you hover over it, it tells you what it does, what it's called. Okay, and the way mirror works, I'm going to type mirror, and we're not going to worry about 3D yet. Clicking on mirror, and now what I want to do is select the object. Okay, I'm in the mirror command. Now what I can do is hover up to the top right, click left click and release, and then draw this window over my object, and then select enter to confirm my selection. Now it says specify first point of a mirror line. Okay, it just depends really on where I want to mirror it, and to get the shape that I showed you earlier, I just mirrored it right here from the center point. Now if I click, it's going to give me kind of put me in a lined command, and then I can basically position that anywhere I want to. It's going to mirror, basically flip it right over 180 degrees over that line to make the same thing on the other side. Okay, so I could do it like this, okay, or this, wherever. It's just going to mirror right on the other side of that line. So getting back to here. Boom. All right, and now it asks the little piece of instruction here. It says erase source objects. I don't want to erase source objects. I want to keep the source objects because I want them to be mirrored together like this. Sometimes you might want to erase the first one. So it's already selected for no. I just hit enter, and that accepts my mirror, and now I have this shape. There's lots of other things we could do with this to make it look cool. And I think for now we're just going to leave it like it is. And you can watch the video and learn how to do this on your own.